Couple of key notes to identify, and then you have a handful of questions on the next 3 pages that you need to answer. So, what is actually meant by math literacy, or what is math literacy? We just said it.
Graphs.
Okay, what about graphs?
Please pardon this interruption. If you have a student in class that has a ticket or a sports pass, you can, they can show you that at this time and be dismissed to the gym for the volleyball game.
Okay, so it's closer to graph literacy, but what do we mean by graph literacy?
Regulations.
What does it mean if you are literate? Huh?
Nah.
Y'all never heard a teacher talk about literacy, maybe in an English class?
I listen to English. Literature.
I heard them talk about literature, but not.
There is literature. So, literacy, we talk about if someone is literate, that is, or literacy in general, that is your ability to read and write. Okay, actually it's read and comprehend what has been read. So what do we mean, keeping that in mind, what do you think we mean by graph literacy?
Being able to read and comprehend graphs.
That's exactly right? So closer to graph literacy, and so what we are looking at is our ability to read and comprehend graphs.
Pardon the interruption. If anyone else has a ticket to the volleyball game, please release them at this time, but they must have a ticket in hand to come down to the volleyball game. Thank you.
Oh yeah, I guess we already covered what does it mean to be graphically literate. So this means you can read and comprehend graphs. There is another detail I want to add to this, though. So if you are graphically literate, that means that you can read and comprehend graphs. So you can determine the story being told. When you read in your English classes and you look at literature, you're reading stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? But even then, a lot of times, is it just the story that you read, or is there something that it means? It's usually something that that story means and that you need to take away from that story. The same thing is true with graph literacy. And if you are graphically literate, you can read and comprehend the graphs so you can determine the story being told by the graphs. Your ability to read is important. So why does graphical literacy matter?
So you can read graphs.
So you can read graphs, so you can tell the story being told by the graphs. But I want you to think about this. This is not a graph that you're used to seeing in like a line or something like that. When I look at the graphs that are on this page, what is within those graphs?
People.
It is information about people.
No, popularity.
Huh?
Popularity of people. Population.
Maybe population. I mean, is that what this graph says?
Yes.
No?
Population of homeless people.
Okay, so the U.S. cities with the most homeless people, the percent of homeless people by household, right? Type and sheltered status. So, do you know what that information is called? Starts with a D. graphs contain data, right? That's information. And what is the number one thing that students complain about with math? What do y'all think?
About, they don't know how to do it.
Okay, so one, they sometimes complain that they don't know how to do it. What else?
How hard it is.
Okay, how hard it is. There's another major issue, because here's the thing. Math is not terribly hard.
You don't wanna do it,
We don't want to do it. Why do we not want to do it?
cause laziness.
No. Yes, but no.
Bored.
We get bored because we don't think the math matters to our
Or need it.
lives, or it's needed for our lives.
Technically, you need it for tax.
It's not just taxes or anything like that, but like legitimately, I don't agree with that statement. I'm trying to change that perception this year. But for the most part, a lot of people who struggle with math, one, they don't care because they've struggled with it in the past, or two, they've said, this isn't going to matter for my life, so I'm not going to care. Data is all about information from the world. It's all about information from your life, right? So graphs contain data, information about the real world and can matter to you. Okay? Graphs contain data. It contains information about the real world, and it's data or information that can be very relevant to you. It can matter for you. So this is why it's important that we do stuff with graphical literacy. Okay? Just a couple more notes. So you'll have a few graphs there, and what is the question above those graphs?
What do I need to pay attention to when I'm
What do I need to pay attention to? What's the first thing you think we should look at?
The percentage.
The numbers.
The numbers.
What do those numbers mean though? How do you know?
Because it said the USA city with the most homeless people.
What are you looking at right there? That's not the numbers, you're looking at the what for that graph. You gotta look at the title first, right? The first thing that you should identify or write down there, what do I need to pay attention to, is what is the topic of the graph? Yes, okay, you're right, we need to look at those numbers, but those numbers don't mean jack squat unless we know what the topic is. And I'm just talking about these graphs, like make those notes down here at the bottom. You should have 2 pages. Look at this page. That you were just taking notes on?
Behind.
Flip it over. There you
I know.
go. Okay.
That's really good questions.
But that's not these questions. That's why I was like, this is legitimately, right here it says, what do I need to pay attention to? I'm asking you to take notes right here so you can use this information later. Okay? So what is the topic of the graph and where are we going to get the topic? I already said it. Title. And there are sometimes subtitles, which is extra information. Right? And you don't always have this next part, but even before you start to look at your numbers, where else do we have some sort of title that we should pay attention to? So the labels, right? And where do we, and so I will say right here I might put labels. And one of the common places that we see labels are on the X and Y axes, right? So you need to look at your title and your subtitles first. It's going to give you that background information. After you look at your titles and subtitles, you need to look at the labels. You need to look at the X and Y axes. And that's the biggest things, right? Once you look at that, then you can start to look at the numbers to say, what do these numbers mean? And that's where this question comes in. What are some observations that you can make based on the graph, right? So you should be asking yourself, what do these numbers mean? Okay? We have those questions. We have the titles, subtitles, the labels, they give us background, but then we ask, what do these numbers mean? Okay? And so then from there, we want to start to ask, is there an upward trend or downward trend? What are the patterns that we see? Right? Why are some things bigger, some things smaller? What is being compared in the graph? Like if you look at that bar graph right there that I gave you on the front page, what's there? What's being compared on that bar graph?
Cities and,
The cities, right? And their number of homeless, right?
Yes.
Right. So we want to pay attention to that story. Is there anything there with like which cities have the most homeless? Do you see anything that might connect the two with the most homeless? Look at those top two. New York City and
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles or LA. Why do you think they have the most homeless?
But they're big.
They're the biggest city.
They're the biggest cities, right? We want to ask ourselves what connects these things, right? What are the trends, right? What patterns do we see? Why are those patterns there? Once you identify the titles, or the title, the subtitles, the labels, and you start to figure out what these numbers mean, these are the main two questions. These are the things you need to answer. What patterns do we see, and why are those patterns there? Does that make sense? We good with that? Those are the two main questions you always need to think about with data. Alright, and so that's what we can look at in here. Now there are 3 different types of graphs that you have, and this is the last thing I will note. Anyone know what we'd call this type of graph?
I see on the floor.
We call it what?
Pie.
It could be called a pie chart or a circle graph or a circle chart. Typically we call it a pie chart because it looks like pieces of pie being cut, right? So we call that a pie chart
Bar graph.
and a bar chart. Okay? And I didn't put an example in it here, but if you have a graph that looks like this, so x and y axes and it's going like that,
That's a data table.
what do we have connecting?
Lines.
It's called a line graph. So the 3 types of graphs that you're going to see are bar charts, pie charts, and line graphs. Okay? Because those questions do come up. What type of graphs are they? And so we want to look at the patterns, we want to look at what's happening, look at what story is being told, right? For example, if you look at graph B, immediately when I look at it, I see 2 different lines, don't you? I haven't even looked at the title yet, but then I need to start asking the question, what patterns do we see? Well, we see it goes up and we see it goes, then it comes back down a little bit later. Why are those patterns there? Why is one line higher than the other? Why is the curve or line going up and then coming back down? Those are the questions we want to pay attention to. And the titles, the labels, the axes are going to help us answer those questions. Does that make sense? We good to go? If you have any questions, you can definitely talk with your groups to help figure it out. You can merge groups if you want to help each other. You can ask me questions. Honestly, I don't even think it should take until 3:15. You should be able to knock it out, and if you finish it early, you can study for the test, or ask me questions, or do whatever you need to do to be better prepared for your test tomorrow, okay? Any questions about what we're supposed to be doing? Let's get to work.